I also do a lot of more like individual stuff. So like I go to council meetings, meet up with traveller liaison teams, try and work on outreach, stuff like that. So I would say that's like my GRT side of activism. I'm also the European Youth Forum representative for the YWCA, which is like a women's organisation in Europe. So I essentially go to different places and meetings representing women's issues on a European level. And other than that, I also do a lot of LGBT work. So I'm a co-founder of Traveller Pride, which is an LGBT Gypsy Roma traveller group and campaign. And I also work alongside like trade union action, because one of the things I like to put forward is intersectional history with GRT and working class history. Like my granddad was a trade union representative all his life. So bringing in those intersections, and I'm also working with like Jewish groups, because I'm personally a lot of intersectional identities. I'm Romani, English Romani. I'm also Jewish. I'm also gay, a woman, working class. So, you know, there's a lot of intersections there, which I think will be interesting to discuss in this conversation about identity.
If we move on to James, perhaps, that's a fantastic introduction, Lois, and certainly I agree that it's going to be really interesting to tease some of this out when we get to the questioning. So James, if you introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is James Gerald Lawrence. I'm currently based in Bristol, but I'm from Ireland. I'm an Irish traveller myself and also part of the LGBT community. I'm a member of the Traveller Pride, which Lois has co-founded, and we've obviously got to meet each other last year and walked Pride and that together. I'm also secretary of the committee for Great Bristol, which is a voluntary group for Gypsy Roma travellers, van dwellers, boaters, etc. And we're just we're very new and fresh at the moment, so we've got our final draft for constitution and all the rest of it, and after that we can then go looking for funding and try support the traveller communities and all the rest of it all inside Bristol, because at the moment we haven't really got any support networks in this kind of region for Bristol. That's me pretty much done in 30 seconds.
Short and sweet.
Yeah,
absolutely fine. So, and finally, if we come around to Lena, and if you just, same as the other two, just give us a wee introduction to yourself and your activism.
Hello, my name's Lena. I do a bit of activism. I can't even get my word out today. I do my activism towards disability access and equality for the disabled. I do it amongst, like, I try and help Gypsy Roma traveller as well as trying just the normal settled community, because everybody's equal when you've got a disability. There's no borders really. Everybody's the same situation. They're all the same. I've campaigned as well as a breast cancer fighter, and I do campaigning and raise some money for breast cancer. And yeah, I just like to fight towards making things more accessible, showing as well in the Gypsy Roma traveller community about having a disability doesn't put your life on hold. You don't have to be judged very different, because I find there's a lot of stigma comes with disability. And yeah, that's mainly me. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you to all our panelists for the introduction. So hopefully you now have a sort of sense of who they are and what you might want to ask them. So questions can be for the panel as a whole, or they can be about perhaps a specific issue or addressed to a specific panelist if you think you want to learn something more about them. I'm going to kick us off with a couple of questions, and these are very general and for everybody. So the first one is, what do you feel your intersectional perspective and, you know, having these multiple marginalizations brings to your own work as an activist?
Would you like me to start off there? Is that all right?
Whoever wants to.
Okay, didn't want to talk over you again then, Emma. I don't want to make it a consistent thing, yeah. But I think that especially in Romani dialogue and GRT stuff, especially because a lot of my work is surrounding like Roma genocide commemoration, I think that being Jewish also brings something added to that perspective. and also a way that kind of brings together different discussions surrounding Holocaust education, and surrounding the different histories and identities from our cultures that have arisen from these like historical tragedies that have happened, with like shared kinship. And I also think that when you bring in different identities into your work as activism, you also like make it more intersectional, because I think that when you enter GRT spaces and you are a GRT person and you are also gay, it can also bring through kind of solidarity with different social issues within GRT activism, which I think is really great. And I also think what it brings to activism is that GRT people aren't just one-dimensional. We're as diverse as general folk in everyday life. We can occupy a lot of different identities and a lot of different perspectives in society. And I think that's what intersectional people from our communities bring into activism. It brings that we all have different experiences in life, which I think is important.
Do Lena or James want to jump in?
Yeah, I do think we do have I think we have a large range, a large variety of people that we need to get different perspectives from in amongst all this, to be honest, because not everybody's on the same boat. So obviously we're going to get, how do I put it? We're going to get a better range of ideas and things to campaign for if we have a range of different people. I don't know if anybody can hear my brothers, because my brothers they're very loud. So I feel very awkward. I feel very awkward at the moment because they're all outside the window. Okay, yeah, so.
Okay. James, have you got something?
Yeah, I think it's great as well, like being from both sides of like these different communities as well. A lot of the time, the LGBT community aren't exactly educated on like GRT issues and that, and it's the same with like the GRT community isn't really educated on the LGBTQ plus issues. So it's like being in the middle and being able to educate both sides of different communities.
Yeah, I do find that. I find that it's the same with disability. It's like there's a stigma. They're very ignorant towards a lot of things, and you're like always trying to explain and show people like, hold on a minute, this is one side of life, this is the other side of life. It can be done.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you always find that ignorance from both sides as well, not just one-sided.
Yeah, I find that as well. I find that I mean, I find it from settled community, traveling community, all communities. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's things that need to be really put out in the limelight to make more awareness. Definitely.
Yeah.
Great. So sort of building on that, so obviously you're moving in these spaces. Some of them are GRT spaces, some of them are not primarily GRT spaces. And I'm wondering, is there a particular issue that is faced by GRT communities that you wish that sort of activism led by settled communities really understood a bit better, and would make it more inclusive and easier to participate in for GRT activists?
I think it's just a lack of understanding in general. Like there isn't even like a basis in society where I feel like there's even been general education about our communities, so that spaces that are there for equality can represent us better and actually help us. Because like something, James might talk about this a bit later as well, but with Traveller Pride, I think part of that stemmed from the fact that like there's a massive gap in LGBT movements not supporting GRT folk because of their own inherent prejudices, and also because they aren't willing to consider the different barriers that might be faced. So, you know, a lot of the time it can't just be that you're there as a movement and that's it. You also have to kind of seek out communities that have barriers and that find it more difficult to access help, especially if there's like, you know, members of the travelling Roma communities who are still nomadic. There still hasn't been plans put in place or like certain education forms put in place by LGBT movements or other equality spaces to accommodate that, really. And I think that's a problem, because I recently I wrote a blog for like Stonewall that was essentially saying that I don't think it's necessarily inherent that travellers don't accept LGBT. The difference is that when you're rejected from your family and your GRT and LGBT, you don't have that barrier that others say white, Gorgia or settled people have if they get rejected. It's a lot more public, it's a lot more visible, because we don't have the barriers to help us or support us if those situations happen. Because like even when we were marching in Pride last year, I'm sure James has stuff to weigh in on this as well, I had like random like white like gay men asking me to kiss them on the cheek for luck or read their palm, and it's like that's just not acceptable. Like in any space, like that's just not acceptable. Yeah, can we have a basis that that's kind of like not, that's not it?
Yeah,
but like,
it's like they're trying to fetishize your relationship, your ethnicity kind of thing, and that disgusts me. That does. But that's just men, isn't it?
Legit, but people wouldn't accept our leaflets in some cases or our stickers, like you know.
Yeah.
Like that was happening at Pride.
I could sing with that, because from up this side, up north of the country here, because I'm on the borders, I'm Cumbria, a lot of travelling people up here are very old-fashioned, like it's very older ways up this way. And I do find that if you had to go and try and bring more awareness, it's the same with it's disability things and like things like that about being gay and things. It's all sort of pushed under the carpet. It's it's like taboo. Don't speak about it. Don't speak about anything and hide it. You know what I mean?
It's similar with mental health as well, isn't it? Like, because like it's just like with travellers, there's such a stigma around like everything. It's like, oh, the shame of it, let's hide it, kind of thing.
But it's normal. Every normal human being at some point feel stressed or feel bad with the mental health. And at some point, there's a lot of travelling men or anybody in car accidents will obtain a disability. Like myself, mine was a car accident. And like, so what? People are gay. It's 2020. People need to move with the times as well. Do you know what I mean? I know you can keep your traditions, but you have to sort of bring your traditions into the 21st century as well. You can't just keep living in the past. It's the same as like this racism and campaigns and things. Can't believe in the past. It's been and happened. We build on the future. We make a positive future for children and everybody else that's to go ahead.
I think it's also that something I wish that Settled Action knew is that they, like, that there hasn't been all this like generational and historical trauma that's been unpicked. So like, for example, I'll be in spaces with like equality organizations and they'll be like, well, they won't speak to us and they say that they don't trust us. It's like, well, yeah, but that's your job to unpick because of historical trauma of oppression that people just aren't even aware of. Like, you know, if I ask people about whether they know about 500 years of Roma slavery in Romania or Roma slavery under Oliver Cromwell in the UK, people don't know that, and they don't question about why communities are isolated or why they're distrusting or why it's hard. And it's because of this generational trauma. Because I think a lot of people look at GRT through an equality mindset and say, oh, well, we're not willing to change, we're not willing to be open. But I think it's because a lot of our identity has been about defending ourselves from consistent attack from society, from authority, from states, you know, from Europe. Like, you know, it's a consistent battle of trying to protect and self-preserve, and this can sometimes come out in like not the best way, but like at the same time, I think when majority society looks at it, they need to also look at their own blame as well in that.
Yeah, and I think it's very unfortunate as well, because what most settled people knows about the GRT communities is what is like given to them in the mainstream media and all of the rest of it, and it's always usually quite negative. So I think if like we had some kind of education system, so kids is taught from a young age like about our history, about who we are, what we're about, then that would kind of prevent a lot of the racism from happening.
There's still a lot of racism here today. Travelling people pulled on a park a few weeks ago during lockdown, and obviously there were settled people on the community jumped on the bandwagon on the reports on the newspaper page. There's mess, there's untidiness, the broke fences, they shouldn't be moving, there's coronavirus, and the people are like, yeah, but they're staying in their own homes. There were settled people sticking up for them and other ones. And then there was this guy, we don't pay tax. We still don't pay tax. He's sick of paying tax, so our children can go to school their children can go to school. And I was like, so hold on, you're complaining in the 21st century that like a gypsy child shouldn't have an education like everybody else, but this is the way that the comments was coming across. And obviously I got carried away and I started writing about it's 21st century. People do pay for taxes. A lot of travellers pay tax, very legal. Some of the biggest businesses are run by travellers. And like, I thought it's such an old vintage mindset that people are stuck in. And it's even settled people. They're stuck in this old mindset, and they really need to, you know, when you expand your mind and you open your vision a bit more, when you're open-minded, you know, they seem to be just stuck in this box of gypsies are thieves, they make a mess everywhere you go, and that was the worst one I've heard, that children shouldn't be educated as good as it was put across. That I just thought was despicable, to be honest.
So obviously when tensions arise with the settled community, often the police end up involved. And we have a question from one of our attendees who's both a doctoral student and working with Police Scotland. And what they're asking is if you guys have something in mind that could actually really improve how the police interact with GRT groups, and thinking as well, coming from this perspective of multiple senses of marginalisation, does there need to be perhaps more consciousness within the police services that people aren't just GRT, they are other things as well?
Yeah, like, I mean, because I'm based up in Cheshire West, and I would work often with Cheshire Police. And an issue that really arose for me was that, like, so I was delivering education for the police force about GRT. And when I experienced a hate crime in my area, I was expected to go to the same police force on my own that I'd had to deliver training to, or was planned to give training to, on anti-Gypsyism that they'd recognised in their own forces. And I think these are barriers that are really hard to like break down. And it can really limit like your accessibility to justice, when, especially as GRT activists and people, there's still massive kind of steps that are being made. But in the same sense, sometimes the inherent systems themselves can already be very prejudiced. And I think something that can be done a lot better is just kind of, I don't know, I guess being more conscious with that. I can't really think on the spot of like specific schemes, because I'm just like, I'm just a random gal up in my parents' house. Like I can't think of that just off the top of my head. But I can give you that experience and say that limited my experience of accessing justice, because we're doing a lot of emotional labour of educating people, often unpaid, by the way, often unpaid. But then when you have a problem, you're expected to go to the same place that you're having to give training on. Like, and it's a bit like this constant conversation that's constantly getting recycled, you know, over and over. It's the same conversations. We were having the same conversations years ago to what we're having right now. It's the same thing.
Down here in Bristol, oh, sorry. Go on,
no, you go on, James.
Down here in Bristol, we've actually, from one of our Great Bristol meetings, we've got a police officer that's actually Romani, and he was recently promoted to sergeant. So I think that's like great to know that we've got that support down here as well. Yeah,
because it was only recently there was a report about people saying that they joined the police force and they were petrified to tell people that there were any kind of GRT. They didn't open their mouth about it because of the prejudice they would have received in the force. It wasn't that long ago I read a report on that.
I think a lot of travellers has that problem actually, because even me myself, I don't ever, like, but when I'm going to a job interview or something, I won't openly tell them that I'm a traveller until after I've received the job.
When I used to work, I would never ever say that I was a traveller. I wouldn't say I was anything to do with Gypsy traveller community, nothing. I just said, but we was always learnt that.
It's quite nerve-wracking, isn't it? Because you have to like kind of hide who you are in order to just to get your feet in the door, and then yeah,
we were always taught that don't say but take the traveller look off yourself a bit, blend. You have to blend.
I hate it when someone says that, take the traveller look off yourself, or you look too much like a country boy, or you look too much like a traveller. It's like, oh.
And then I've got to the really good point now where I just blend, and then when people find out that I'm a traveller, they're actually shocked.
I get that a lot.
They don't realise how like we're just normal people, you know what I mean? We could just blend in and have a laugh and a joke. Just
Yeah. I've actually had it from a few travellers before where they private message me and they'd be like, oh, you're not a traveller, you're just a country boy and you're pretending to be a traveller. This, that, and I'm thinking, why would I pretend to be a traveller to become oppressed and ostracised from society and all of this problems? Why would I choose for this?
why would you even, why would you want to like bring more problems to yourself by saying that? Yeah, I do get that.
Sorry, I think also with the police though, I think it's also that I think police forces, it's hard because like I've been in meetings where like, you know, the whole issue of like the criminalisation of trespass and things like that, we've got to understand the inherent laws and policies surrounding GRT as they stand are also like, you know, a lot of them are very racially charged and not good. So it's this thing of like, it's this constant conversation, like for example, I've had it with Cheshire Police, where we've almost had to barter on like how far they can get away with just ignoring them and how much can be done on that. Because this is hard because we're also talking about like policy, which is very, very racist, especially regarding like, you know, roadside encampments and things like that. So I think if the police force are wanting to, the question about the police force is really just a question wider towards policymakers about almost decolonising policy and taking out the racism from the policy in itself the police then represents. Because a lot of aspects of policing come from the top down. It comes from, you know, the top. It comes from the laws that are created and what they're governed by. And that's an issue that then fuels the police force and how they enact those against our communities, you know?
That actually leads on fantastically to another question we've had come in. So basically this looks at the idea of trespass laws and settlements, and our attendees wondering, so obviously they're asking partly whether surely, you know, we need to have better sites and better facilities, and they talk about having sites that actually have sanitation and refuse facilities and that's set up for them. But they also are asking, are there ways for individuals or trade unions, for example, to help put pressure on councils to provide sites and to provide access?
Represent and show up. Like the thing is that I'm going to tell you something. Like I'm going to tell you, like the travel liaison teams that we currently have in our councils, a lot of them are not doing their jobs properly. There is no travellers on them at all. No travellers, and they're making a lot of money as well. And I worked with them a lot, and I've been the only unpaid person in the room and also the only community member. And like that's included people within the travel liaison team who say that traveller-owned sites are gross and that council-owned sites are much nicer. So I think we've got to look at with trade unions and other people of equality, we've also got to be pushing for travellers to have the autonomy to also own their own sites. And also about campaigning against the certain things that are around council-owned sites at the moment. Because an issue that I had when I was engaging with local councils is they were telling all these council members, some of them were racist as anything, being like, oh yeah, do you want to come around any of the sites? Just let me know and I'll drive you around. It's not a tour. It's not a zoo. Travellers are people and Romanies are as well. And we have to really truly look at how we're representing ourselves as community members and also as those who are in trade union movements. It's not just about putting pressure on getting more sites. It's about pressuring them about how they're running them and actually wanting to know and be in those meetings and being like, well, hang on a minute. How are you devising these sites? Are they doing it as a tick boxer? Because I've been in meetings where they say, oh, is that how many we need then? Is that done? Is that a done deal? That is not enough and that is not the correct dialogue. It's not just a conversation about how many sites. It's a question of how they're running them, who's running them, and also like, you know, how much do the community members have autonomy, as in like, you know, self-representation, and are in those meetings that decide in those things. Because at the moment, it's just a load of Gorgia people talking to other Gorgia people about travellers, and then there's none of us in the conversation. Yeah, legit. Yeah. And it's an absolute farce. So like,
I mean, we've got a transit camp there was the council transit camp for people to go on and stop that was shifting up and down. That's been closed off. It's been shut down altogether. So there is no camp. There's no transit camp here in Carlisle at all. There's actual settled camps where you can go on, you can get settled, but there's nowhere for someone to stop at all. That's why I piped up on the newspaper report about people stopping on the park not long ago. people wouldn't have been stopping on a park if they had that council transit site was open and there was access to it.
Yeah.
And but then it's the same with that site, that access on that transit site. There's one toilet block with toilets that's must have been there for about 30, 40 years. Well, maybe I'm over-exaggerating. Maybe about 20, 30 years. But they're rotten. They're not very nice. They're not clean at all. And as far as I know, there wasn't even a shower cubicle in it for people to get away.
Yeah, as Lois has said there about like someone saying that the council sites are usually nicer than the traveller-owned sites. Well, every council-owned site that I've ever been to or visited is always parked next to a dangerous road, toxic land, infested with flies, rats, etc. You know, whenever I went to a private site, it's much tidier. The everything is painted, everything is fresh and clean.
They won't ever pass. You never ever really see a Gypsy traveller site past near something like that, because it's like our community needs to be shunned away on the outskirts, hid away either next to electric power stations, motorways, or to sewerage works or dumps or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they want to push us to the outside of society.
Yeah, we're brushed out the way, pushed out, I think.
So
this is also a class issue.
To get a lot of questions coming in, so I am going to move you on slightly, just because we do want to try and answer as many people, and there's some great questions, so which is why we want to move on. So this one, so I'm kind of combining two questions here, and this is mainly focused on LGBT issues, and one of them is sort of within GRT communities, what are these issues increasingly more accepted? Is there a large difference across communities or across areas? And does religion play a role in this? Does it impact on that level of acceptance?
Well, I don't see why a religion should have an impact on that role, because as far as I know, as I'm saved as a Christian, that we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, are we not? And aren't you supposed to love your neighbour? No matter
I'm
what.
not sure for Gypsies or Romani, I can't really speak for them, but for travellers, I can say that like religion is a big thing, and it's a big factor in what it like plays in like acceptance. For me, my family accepted me, and I've had it pretty neutral, but I've known of a lot of other LGBT travellers that hasn't had it as easy as I've had it, and a lot of the time it is due to the religion or Bible says this, that, and the other. So for a lot of travellers, it can be due to religion or older traditions.
Yeah,
I think it's because that's often what gets weaponized towards me when talking about GRT rights and LGBT spaces, is people will just say, well, GRT don't support LGBT folk. And I think there has to be a really big like magnifying glass put on that. Like, I come from a family that was 100% accepted, and also to the point where they also let other traveller and Romani folk who haven't been accepted meet their partners at my home and stuff like that. Like, they're very supportive. And the thing that I don't like is that people act like it's a cultural thing, as in like embedded in our culture that span from it, to say that it is wrong. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think it's just that a lot of minority communities cling to religion to find some form of power in a society where you're systematically pushed down. When you can't rely on a state to uplift you, you rely on religion to find some form of solace that you will have personhood in a society that doesn't give you it. So I would say that it's not about whether you're GRT. It's not necessarily about that. And the only reason that it happens is because we've been so pushed down in society that people have clung to certain things which have ideas about LGBT stuff because of systematic persecution. And I think that's really important to say, because I get very frustrated about people trying to hijack our community and justify their racism by saying that it's actually because we're inherently homophobic, and we're not. Travellers aren't born homophobic. We're just born in our community and in our culture. It's because of different aspects of society which have oppressed us.
Not really. It's not spoke about as much.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's really. Now, I have a lot of friends. I've got friends that are trans. I've got friends that are gay. It's not about that. It's about education. People are not educated. Obviously, as the shunned away and the just keep it blocked out. Do you know what I mean? It needs to be in the limelight. It needs to be brought up and made another important campaign to try and raise more awareness in our own community. because if we don't, it's just going to be an ever-ending circle over and over and over again, isn't it? Every generation.
So sort of heading on from there, one of our attendees is wondering how gender and your experiences of being gendered or your gender identity have specifically shaped your activism and your experience as GRT individuals.
I think, like, I mean, as a woman, like, I think that, like, again, it's also where people apply their stereotypes. People will say, especially in feminist spaces that I've been in, they'll be like, oh, well, Romany folk, the women don't take charge or anything like that. And I think if you're actually from the community, you realise how far that is from the truth. Like, the only people who've ever been loud and shouty in my community have always been the women's. Like, I'm telling you, I'm not scared of my dad. I'm scared of, like, my mum. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but that's how it is. Like, my family, my nan, she actually controlled the finances of the house. Because my family have lived in houses for quite a while. They haven't really been nomadic for a very long time. But like, all our family lived on a street, and it was like my nan who controlled all the finances because my granddaddy struggled with his numbers. So like, there's different things. And also, I really want to point out this is also like, you got to remember, you got to scrutinize our history. All of our history around gender and GRT has been told by gorgeous who have studied and observed unpaid GRT in history, and from an academic bourgeois perspective, doesn't actually come from our people. And actually, when Romany women first came to the UK over 500 years ago, the reason that our stereotype is being sexualized and exotified is because Western white men had never seen women before that dressed comfortably for their bodies, that had their own finances because they were flower selling, they were hawking, they were doing all these things, and there was actually collective child rearing as well. So travellers who were in communities where they were all living together, if a woman wanted to go off and work, there was other people in the community who could look after the kid or watch them while they were actually going out and selling. And what white society has done is taken an example of early feminism before modern Western feminism and has twisted that into their own narrative. Our community is actually founded in feminism, and that is where our stereotypes come from. It's because people can't handle strong women who have their own financial resources, so they turn it into a fetishized Esmeralda archetype. And I think that's important to say.
Yeah.
I think maybe James, if you want to come in, just because obviously you're navigating this from a very different perspective, so.
Yeah, so what was the question again? Because with gender identity, I've never really... How
does your gender impact upon your experiences, either within traveller communities or within LGBT communities?
To be honest, I've not really ever had a negative experience of anything from my gender. Being a man and all the rest of it, it's just casual, I suppose. I don't really know how to answer that question. Yeah, it's just, for me, it's been okay.
But you're a man, so you're
It's been okay.
Yeah, because it's like, women can't do this, and I'm a very opinionated woman. I really am, because I do have a lot of brothers. I've just had one recently, and he's like standing, and he's being like, I'm trying to tell him, go away, or you just go away. But he's got ADHD, so he's a bit hypo and that sometimes. Now, going to that, I do find often older generation of traveling people, they are very sexist. A woman should do this, a woman should cook, a woman should clean, it's a woman's job to do this.
Yeah, and hitting on that, like when I was being brought up and all the rest of it, we were brought up in quite like masculine roles, like a man has to be a man kind of thing. Like, and for me, that's something that I've always struggled with, being a bit like more on the feminine kind of side of things. Do you know what I mean? I was always hanging around with the girls and all the rest of it, and everyone would be like, oh, go over there and hang around with the boys and do this, you know? So it's like the traditional roles that you're kind of raised with as well.
Yeah, and like men shouldn't sit with women, and like with the older generation of things, a lot of the older ones I know, like they've got a problem with just two people being pals sitting next to each other having a chat. Like it's you can have friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just mad. It's just mad, and I get very upset about it. I'm very vocal towards it. I can have as many friends as boys that I want.
But hitting on what Lois said there, I think that was made perfectly, like with a lot of like the women controlling finances and this and the other, because that is actually something that is so common within like traveller communities and that, but like it's not really spoken of. But like I do know a lot of women that has got like full control over the money, the spending, or what's going on and what's being saved on. So they have like, there is a lot, the women do have a lot more power than what's being brought out into like the mainstream media. Like the way it's being brought out is like, oh, women is only supposed to be in the kitchen to cook and clean this, that and the other, but it's like totally not like that at all. Like there is a lot of respect for women, especially like older women and all the rest of it. If you give an older traveller woman cheek, Jesus Christ, you know, you'll never hear the end of it.
You wouldn't know. But yeah, you are right there. I think it's played down though for the masculine side of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh no, the woman's the stronger part of the family. Really, a lot of the time, women are the strong backbone of the families. They're
I
keeping
agree.
it. Yeah, so I do get that.
So, Lena, you mentioned there that your brother is ADHD, and one of our attendees is wondering if there's anything within sort of GRT movements or specific GRT activist organizations or charities that are trying to help people that would fall into this category of neurodiversity, whether that's mental illness, whether that's ADHD, autistic spectrum. Is there that sort of...
I don't believe there's enough help out there for the mental health sector. I mean, I've got a cousin, she's got mental health, and I've seen it many a time. There isn't been enough care for her. Not as much like getting her care, but there's no aftercare for her. She gets thrown into her flat and then that's it. She's left to do what she's doing. But obviously, when a person's been through something like mental health, like they need more aftercare. They do need like a care worker and someone to keep an eye on them and keep going around. The worst place to be is sitting in like a flat, lonely, with your own mind when you've got mental health. That's a big battle, and I don't feel like there's enough help for assessing Gypsy kids, traveller kids, the Roma community. I don't feel like there's enough assessments for things like ADHD. Now, because I've seen it and I know what it is, I can go and see someone's child and you can see straight away just the quick signs of the attention deficit or the actions on impulse, because with someone with ADHD, they don't think about the consequences. They'll just think, I'm going to go do it. So if it comes into their head to go smash a window, they'll go smash the window. They won't think of, oh no, I've smashed the window, I'm going to get in trouble for it. They don't think about the consequences of anything. They just go and do it. And I don't feel like there's enough assessments for a lot of the travelling community with that. It's the played of the role of the traveller, then they're a bit wild or things like that, you know what I mean?
I think it's difficult as well for a lot of travellers actually accessing these healthcare services when a lot of the time a lot of people don't have fixed abodes and that as well. I've heard a lot of like them having difficulties actually getting that help. So
yeah, it would be hard as well if you haven't got a permanent address. It would be hard because obviously a lot of the councils and a lot of the cases of the doctors and things like that, to assess them, they wouldn't be interested in trying to find them. They would say that they've sent a letter and if you're not going to reply, that's your problem, kind of thing. So I do see that.
Do you think there's maybe a role then, so obviously there's charities among the settled community that are trying to improve, because some of these issues obviously around access, around facilities to get testing, that do exist within settled communities, but maybe not to the same extent. Do you think these charities need to remember that the GRT community is there and needs to perhaps be included in these movements and these pushes?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the GRT is like the left out group. We're just the last group to be thought of everything. And it does need to be more inclusive. They need to remember about our community a bit more.
So there have been a couple of questions about ways to support GRT groups in charities, but rather than sort of just roll out a list of charities here, what I'm thinking is after this, the panelists can make some suggestions of initiatives and charities that they're aware of that could be supported, and we will send them out with the feedback questionnaire. So for people who are interested and do want to pursue this further, those resources will be there. So one of the points that Lois touched on earlier was about an ignorance of history, and obviously this is really topical at the moment around how we teach British history and the fact that we don't really teach huge chunks of it, full stop. And one of it is, how do you think history can be communicated to society, whether that's to children, whether that's just more broadly? Are there any ways that you think that would be particularly effective?
Sorry, I just had to go run get my charger for my phone. I was like running around my house. In terms of history, I think communicating that needs to have GRT in the conversation, because like half of the books that I see aren't wrote by GRT, and people don't also look at the ethics of each of these books that are being created and how we're educating about Gypsy, Roma, traveller communities. Sorry, I'm a bit out of breath. But like, I see all these like academic pieces, and people don't look into the fact that a lot of the times academics were going into GRT communities promising payment or to have the photos back or things like that. Like Richard O'Neill was talking about that at one point in a meeting I was in with him. And then it's like they just disappear. And a lot of these informations and studies that are being brought on as education pieces are only appreciated as such because they come from someone with an academic certificate. And I think we really have to think about how there's a lot of GRT who are very good at educating about our community, who don't have the formal education that is appreciated in wider society because of barriers, and because there is a lot more education than just that of formal or that of, you know, Gorgia folk. There is also other ways as well. And I think that if we're going to deliver education, it needs to come from community members from a wide range of perspectives. And we have to understand the spectrum of privilege in that sense as well. Like, you know, I'm like mixed. I'm also living in a house. I have certain elements of privilege in my life that someone who's living on the road just has that isn't my experience. And we need to make sure that we're not engaging in putting the most palatable voices up first. So, like, you know, if I go into a meeting, I'm a lot more palatable having been in university, having been in a house, you know, having been not, you know, I'm like mixed, like, you know, I'm a lot more palatable than someone else. And I think that's an issue as well. And I think it's important that when we're educating, we just have people being paid, being actually thoroughly, like, put your money behind it. If there's charities in here, you know, we've got travellers in this chat, we're all here. We have links to everyone else because we have links to loads of other GRT activists. Put money behind it to get the resources together, to have resources that are actually made by travellers in an ethical way, where we're actually being represented properly. Because time after time, I see all these books that refer to people incorrectly, that have incorrect information, and they're being paid so much money and probably getting profits when there's actual community members who could easily correct that and write something just as good, but because they don't have the bourgeois qualifications of a master's degree, they're neglected. And I think, no, if we're going to decolonise our education and deliver it correctly, we need to actually represent our community members who are out on the road, you know, and out there, or as we are, not a bougie academic called Richard. I want to see our people in there. Do you know what I mean?
So on that note, because we've had a fantastic question in, are you aware of any books or anyone writing or producing at the moment, so either from GRT individuals or from settled people who are nonetheless doing the work well and trying to do it, is, like, you know, address some of these concerns that you're raising that are serious issues, Lois, so that if people are wanting to read up on this, they're reading either work by the community or that is endorsed by the community as being valid?
Yeah, what I will do is I will create a reading list after this, where I will put together a whole list of resources, some of which are free, some of which you will have to buy or access through a library, about GRT communities that, again, that's either endorsed by the community or wrote by us. I will also put links to GRT pages that navigate this in a different way. So some people communicate their book education or amazing expertise through videos. So for example, you have It's Cushy to Rocker, they're a mental health GRT campaign. They do amazing videos. You also have like Traveller's Times, they do videos as well. Traveller's Voice, you know, even Davey Donaldson, you must know him if you're on here. And if you don't, you need to get educated on him. But he's about, you know, he's doing stuff, documentaries, you know, nice little bits and pieces. look for those people, because it's not always just about finding a book, because it's hard to find a publisher these days, and it's hard to find ways to do that. It's also about finding people that you can just engage with on different levels. So it might be engaging with traveller businesses. There we go, there's something out there. I'll put a list of traveller businesses that I know that you can put your money towards reparations and all that. I also know Sarah Eilert Lolly-Dory. She's a really good friend of mine. She's also Romani and Jewish. She's wrote a piece for Hey Alma about Romani Jews. There we go, there's that. I'm making a workshop leaflet about Romani Jews and the similarities between culture, about history, about why we exist, because something I'll bring into this, which is my experience, is I'm kind of sick of going to council meetings and people get mad hyped when they find out that I'm like Romani and Jewish, and they're just itching to ask me about the Holocaust as if it's like my favourite bread, as if it's like challah on a weekend. It's like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about the Holocaust all the time and centre whiteness over like our individual cultures, because like my identity as like a Jewish and Romani person isn't just like exterminations. Like we actually have other stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like my whole life, like, you know, we actually have richness beyond the atrocities that have been committed against us. And I think that's something else that we need to decolonise in our education as well, is the fetishisation of trauma towards traveller and Romani communities, because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of going to Holocaust commemoration events are hosted by settled people who really get mad hyped about showing us images that can never be consented to, of like Romani people getting shot or their bodies being mangled. And it's like, you shouldn't need to see those things to care. And I think there's a big, people get mad hyped. Like when I was doing like with the local travel liaison team, they were getting dead excited about me doing this meeting because all of the council's members who were attending a meeting were anti-GRT. And they were like, oh, it's going to be so like, you know, it's going to be a lot going on. It's like, well, when you're an actual community member entering that space, it's not fun, because you then have to like deconstruct it afterwards. Like I've missed a whole year of my life from my education. Like I've left university. I didn't go there for 9 months because of anti-Gypsyism that wasn't just from people in my general life, but from these structures of power that are also educating and getting a lot of space in doing that, and they're doing it wrong.
So obviously what we have is a situation where people claim they want to create safe spaces and do education, but they're actually creating very unsafe spaces. Before we move on, do Lena or James have anything they want to add to how education could happen? Obviously, James, you can look at it as well from an Irish perspective and how education about history and stuff happens there. And then we've got a couple of other fantastic questions we're going to move on to as well.
See, when I was brought up, I would have loved to have like LGBTQ issues like being educated in that in class, but obviously because I went to an Irish Catholic school, you know, that's just not going to happen. So I kind of educated myself on my own LGBTQ issues, like just quick Google searches, this, that, and the other, and then you find out your own information. But I think, yeah, over in Ireland, we're very behind the times with certain situations. So we're very slow over in Ireland. How about you, Lena?
Well, I'm just thinking here about how education, because the only way I've done it is sort of educated myself. So I left school and I never really got a secondary education. So when that come about, I had to self-educate. I am self-educated a decent amount. I'm not bad, but to learn about, like, it should be taught a bit more. There should be a wider range in education as well. I mean, like, the recent events that's going on about Black culture and slavery and things like that, there isn't enough highlighting what that people went through. But like Lois has just said, there's a lot highlighting about the Holocaust, but it's not highlighting the positive things neither. As like people, we can't keep living in the past. Like I said, nobody's showing the great things now from the future that's here. You know what I mean? It's everything's always held to such a bad thing. But I don't know. I just don't know where.
So this links quite nicely. So one of our panelists has noted as well that, you know, there are now sort of attempts happening in various sort of education bodies and among politicians to sort of try and redress some of the problems, particularly around education. But obviously one of the best ways to sort of try and do that is to get the louder political voice in the first place. And we've already noted in the chat that there just really aren't any GRT politicians, or at least they're not people who openly talk about being GRT or openly admit to being GRT. And we've already discussed why that might be and that people hide that identity. But do you can you think of a way for getting that political voice and representation, whether at a Westminster level, whether at a sort of devolved level, whether at a council level?
Yeah, we do need, won't we? We need like a Gypsy council, and we need our own MPs. Because how we need more, how would I put it, more in the limelight. Our people needs to be recognised a bit more than what we are.
I think it
shouldn't
also comes. Oh, sorry,
Go
Lena.
on.
I know you carry on. No, I thought you
No,
finished. No, I want to hear your great words. Go on, yeah. Go on, gal. Give us a
It
bit more.
we shouldn't have to put up with the stigma that's held us for centuries. We shouldn't have to put up with that. It's always that bad stigma. And why can't GRT be loud, be heard, be in Westminster, be MPs, be everywhere? It shouldn't have to be stuck to that stigma.
I know over in Ireland there was a few people that was campaigning for like a few seats in the Dáil and all that. So I think there was about 4 Irish travellers going for it over there, but none of them got voted in as far as I'm aware. But it was nice just to see them actually going for it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but it's getting voted in. We need
getting voted in. Yeah, exactly.
There needs to be more. We need more seats. We need like our own government, really.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a voice to actually speak up and defend our people, rather than having people constantly putting in their negative things in their manifestos, like the Conservative, rest of it.
It's not even that, right? Because it goes one way or the other with things like that. But the thing is, other minorities are recognised and other minorities have more say. So why do we not have as much say as those other people?
That's a question as
we
well
are
that kind of links to that, Lena, that's come in is, do you think that at the moment politicians just feel they don't have to take notice of GRT issues? And is it perhaps that you're not viewed as a voting bloc? Because obviously lots of political decisions are motivated by getting votes. And is there a way to maybe be more of a voting bloc, or is that, be taken seriously as one?
Yeah, it needs to be that. I mean, that's as a voting bloc, the GRT is a very, very large community. It's very large, and it's a very large voting bloc if you get people to actually vote. So really, it's a large chunk, I'd say, on the political agenda. That's why we do need more MPs. We do need more of our place in Parliament.
I think unfortunately though, because of the amount of like attacks from the mainstream media, it's easier for politicians to gain votes by being against us rather than with us.
Legit, that is a problem, because like the thing is that I don't like to put the blame on travellers not being in positions of power on traveller people. I think it's that it's just not going to happen whilst we have a society that allows the prejudice against travellers just as common as like people's opinions on soup. Like it's all the time, and it comes in every form, and it's like you got the world against you. But I think it also comes across in this other sense, which is MPs love to give us a little bit of lip service. They love to come to the events and say, oh yeah, we really care about yous. They want pictures of us by the Vardos or by the wagons so they can stand there and look a bit different. And then they disappear, and I never see them again. I never see them again, and they don't do nout. And that's a problem. They go. I've never seen people move so fast. 1 minute you're shaking their hand, the next minute they're off down the road because they've done their bit then. They've checked the box, and now they've gone because they don't see us, because they exploit the fact that they don't think travellers or GRT have the education or knowledge behind us to know when we're not getting what we should be getting. And the thing is that I have gone to meetings where I have had councillors in local areas, from the Labour Party especially, say that they are not willing to pursue GRT rights because it would sacrifice their election, their voters. And it's like, but this is what they say in an open room where there's rooms full of activists, people who describe themselves as anarchists, as socialists, as equality pursuers, as feminists, and they don't care. And I think this is the problem, is that this whole thing that we're doing right now, it is kind of about just turning around to actual people attending this and outside of the world, just being like, well, do you actually care? Do you actually care? Because I think that's a really big question. The reason that travellers and Romanies aren't in power isn't because we're not worthy of it or we're not good enough. It's because the inherent systems that create that is dependent on a certain level of elite and middle class bougie outlook on life to kind of like get there, you know? Because if I turn up to like Parliament going, all right, do you guys want to, you know, have a chat over a sarnie? People are gonna be like, what is that? What is that? They do that at university. I'm in a poetry space and people are like, what is that? You know,
Lois, you
like,
use
what
the
is
term
going on here?
checking the box, you know, the idea that you've done your bit and you move on. And we've had a couple of questions. Obviously, this is Gypsy Roma Traveller History Month. And do you actually think having a history month is a useful way of tackling stereotypes? It's something that should be done? Are you concerned that it's a month and people can say they've done their Gypsy Roma Traveller History Month event and check the box and then ignore it for the other 11 months? And often, do you find that actually people within the GRT community are aware of History Month and utilize it, or do you find that it's just sort of activists doing stuff?
I wasn't really aware of it, so I'm going to be honest. I wasn't aware of it, and then I come across it, and then I started to look into it, and then I started to understand about it. But I mean, I wasn't aware, so there needs to be a bit more awareness brought up to that for the month. But it shouldn't even be a month, should it really? It should be permanent. It should be every day. It should be a little bit of knowledge every day, really. So
it's kind of a revolving door. People check in and check out. They do their tweet with the hashtag GRTHM, which no one in the wider world knows what that means. But if anyone ever asks them about anti-Gypsyism, they go, hang on a minute, I did a tweet. I did my work. I did my activist for the world, for the GRT community. I wrote a tweet and I tagged you. It's like, that's not enough. You know, GRT History Month.
Like, where I'm from here up in Cumbria, it's a hard prospect because you do get people that are so anti-Gypsy, right? GRT community. But then there is other people that is for the community. Because with it being like, I'm in Carlisle, it's a little city, but it's big. It's a city, but it's like a town. Everybody knows everybody. So when there's like people commenting about gypsies and the sites and things like that, everyone will say, you'll get more the majority of people popping up and saying, I know travellers, I know a lot of gypsy people, they're lovely people, they give you the last loaf of bread, you know, they will look after you. And then you always get that slight one or two in that stigma that is ignorant towards it. So you can't be like everybody. See, here, it's not everybody's anti-Gypsy here. Not everybody at all. I've got an awful lot of friends from the settled community. I have a good mixture of society. So I don't know, like, it's a bit of a harder predicament. You know what I mean? It's more, we need to raise awareness. We need to bring more people into the fold and awareness of it.
So, James, I'm thinking as well. So think about history months.
History month. I actually love the history
month. There's Black History Month. Is part of the problem, perhaps, do you think, that history months allow people to tick their box? You know, right? We've had February. We flew our pride flag, and off we go again. And you know, this is Pride Month, and Glasgow's got their flag out again. But
for a few people, I think it is the case. But I think also as well, like when you see a lot of like your own organisations, like I think it's Traveller Times posting out like the daily information cards and that. I think that's great to see that, because I learn stuff that I don't even know about my own communities, you know, and I think it's great to raise any kind of positive awareness for our communities in whatever way we can, even if that is just someone trying to tick their boxes, because you'll always have that one person that just wants to join in and hop on the trend of the hashtag, and then next month they've got a new issue to join into. But if they're creating positive awareness for Gypsy Roma travellers, then I think that's great.
Yeah. It's all about the positive vibes.
Even if it's just for a month.
Yeah, well, that's it. We've got to try and get away from the bad stigma and get the good stigma out there. Bring it, you know.
Exactly, because for that other 11 months, I'm constantly seeing posts from the Daily Mail, the Sun, this, that, and the other about, traveller illegal encampment here, this, that, and the other. So it's nice to actually finally see some positive stories coming out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a safe space for us. Like there's that 1 month where even if it doesn't reach the outer world in the same way, the way that we generate it as a community for ourselves is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So thinking about history and GRT history, we've had a question about whether there's a role that museums can play in this issue. So obviously, you know, there's issues around who has the right to artifacts and stuff, and there's bigger issues around decolonization in museums at the moment. But is this an area where GRT could be better represented? Is that something that you think communities would want to engage with?
Well, yeah, because, right, talking about museums and things like that, we went down to, where did we go? Beamish? It was Beamish. Family road trip, we all decided to go down to Beamish, and they had all these old-fashioned carts and things. And my dad looks over and he goes, oh, I've got a gypsy wagon over there. The gypsy wagon, of all of them, was hidden away in the corner as far as away it could and blocked in with other things, and you couldn't actually go look at it because there was a chain and you weren't allowed to have access down there. And I was sitting there to my dad and I went, you know, this is all like vintage museum things and stuff like that. Why is that not out on show? Why is that tucked away in the corner? Like, it shouldn't be seen at, it was a disgrace to look at kind of thing. It really annoyed me that, actually, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think more things should be brought into the museum as well. I think so. We should have our own section of things.
I'd go one better than that. I think we should have our own museum, our own big museum. Like, honestly, like,
Run by community members.
Yeah, a big museum, bringing in Dosh to the community, brilliant. But, like, it's this thing of, like, how it would be done. Like, I'd love it if it was that. Because, like, my experience, like, I think because people have so much, like, a basis that just, like, white British is just the norm, that they can't handle, like, two things at once. It's like, when I say I'm Jewish and Romany, I can literally feel people looking at me and they just want to say, like, how do you exist? How does that happen? And it's like, well, actually, if you look at society outside of the lens of just white British is the norm and nothing else happens, then you kind of realise that there is a lot of diversity. I think if we had a museum, then we can bring all these histories with our own voices. But like I said, that someone just put it in as well. Davey just put it in, saying there is actually a museum. I think there is other ones across Europe as well for like Roma history and stuff like that. But I think it would be great if we had like a really like proper big museum.
This is why it's all right having that one museum, but if we had a section in every museum, it would raise awareness in more areas. More people. I
love that, Lena. Every museum, I want a section right now.
Yeah, where is it? Section in every museum up and down Britain, and therefore it brings awareness to every area, that everybody that's going to that museum, because you think how many people will go to a museum. So if you've got one even a little concession GRT right there, how many people would it draw awareness to and bring more awareness of our history and things, our way of life?
We can have like a little GRT museum tour, go around the world and go to all different schools and that, like with the entire museum, and educate the students. And I think that'd be great.
A museum book.
You heard it here first. There's going to be a traveling museum, literally going around the globe, educating on GRT issues.
Is that happening?
Wait.
No, this is James's idea.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea,
when it
James.
Pops up,
really put the traveller in traveller, eh?
If I
James Lawrence is the one who
right now.
I think it would be a good idea. I was speaking as well to Lisa and Lisa Smith and a few weeks ago, and I was saying, why don't they even have a Gypsies with disabilities campaign, and like bring it forward that even travellers have disabilities. There's a section there, like there's a lot of people with this disability. There's a lot of people in wheelchairs. There's a lot of people as amputees. There's a lot. Like, why can't we even have a campaign there to bring awareness of like Gypsies with disabilities? Like, we're another section. Because,
yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, that's another section, because like when I had my accident, I was in hospital. Yeah, I was in hospital. Everybody's the same. Everybody's equal. You've all got the same injury. But then my way of life wasn't the same as their way of life. And it was hard because you have to adjust to two different ways of lives. And it's a hard adjustment. But if I knew people, I didn't know anyone to go meet up or have a cup of tea with or anything that was of a travelling community at that time. Now I know loads of people. But at that time, it wasn't. It was a very lonely time. So I think there should be a campaign for that as well.
There's
So,
also Black Romanis as well, that I think it's important just to know. There's activists who are also like, with this whole thing with BLM, there is like Black Romani people as well. Like there's an activist who's based in London called Mina Rose. She's an activist. There's also Aurora Luna. They have a whole thing about being Black and Romani, Black and GRT that's available online. I'm really sorry, Emma. I just wanted to like.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you brought it up, and our attendees, I'm sure, appreciate it. It's just I'm looking at the time and I'm looking at the questions, and I'm going to try and get a few more in there for people. So we sort of linking on from that a bit is like, what can organizations, so the question explicitly talks about LGBT charities, but I think it could apply to mental health charities, it could apply to disability activism, could any of these things, but what can these organizations do to actually make GRT people feel more welcome and safe in them? We've touched before that sometimes these spaces don't feel safe. And is there something, maybe just like one thing that you can think of straight away that needs to change?
So, so an LGBT youth club, which is called Freedom Youth. I used to go to that as a young kid. It's like a little youth club. You get one-on-one counselling sessions and all the rest of it. But they've actually asked me to do a workshop on like Gypsy, Roma, traveller education and everything, which obviously I can't do that at the moment because of the ongoing pandemic. But obviously when that is finished up, I will be going back to that youth club to deliver a Gypsy, Roma, traveller workshop. And I think that is important, just inviting us in and being as inclusive as you can to our communities. And also
yeah, I feel like there should be like even like a chat line as well, like that they should be able to phone, because not everybody, you know, like would like to have things on the internet or go to like a community center or thing, you know what I mean? Because it might still be disregarded by the family. It might be looked upon, you know what I mean? They might not be allowed to be openly gay and things that they would like to be. So maybe there should even be a chat line for them to be able even to find someone to speak to confide in, and have a talk about where they should go in life, and you know what I mean? Help them out.
So there
instead of being
is
stuck in a little bubble.
a question that links into that, whether there's a role for sort of peer services and peer link ups between groups, or between like the Celtic community and GRT, or between, you know, sort of thing, maybe what James is saying, between somebody in an LGBT charity with GRT people. Is there a role for that kind of peer-to-peer on a more personal level?
So
yeah, I mean, like Travel Pride does, doesn't it, James? I mean, we have a group where we're all together and people can kind of like come in and out. I also think on a point to like what orgs and places can do, it's just be willing to be uncomfortable and look at criticism also within your own staff members. Because like I've been to like equality spaces before and I've had really bad instances from staff. Like someone who was a member of staff for an equality org told me that it was good that my nan was dead because it was one less pyggy to worry about. And they all watched that happen, and she's still working with refugees. Like she's still working with refugees learning English in that same org structure.
Did you report that, Lois?
Yeah.
And did you ever get a follow-up or anything?
No.
That's
like
horrendous.
this is another thing, so the reporting process like doesn't work well. But it's this thing that you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and take criticism and actually take action within your own spaces. But yeah, sorry, James, you can go on about the whatever you wanted to say. Sorry about
see, when I went to that LGBT group, Freedom, because yeah, obviously I wasn't actually out as anything at that time of my life, so I was actually just able to go there. And when I was taking the check sheet and all the rest of it, my orientation, I just put a question mark, and they were totally like happy with me leaving that. So I didn't actually have to like openly like tell them what I was at the time. And then they offered me like some counselling sessions one-to-one with the workers and that, and it was really, really good. It just opened up my mind and was able to make me more comfortable with my sexuality.
That was quite good though, question mark. That was like,
yeah, I didn't want to put like anything else. I just put
it was sort of like an invite for them though, like, well, he's got a question mark here, so maybe he's questioning things, so we'll talk to him and bring him in. Yeah, that was actually real good. That, yeah, I like that. I think that was great.
Okay, so I think we've got time for one more question, and I'm really sorry if we've not got to your question, but I hope everyone's appreciated that we've had these fantastic answers and these discussions around the answers and these different perspectives. And as I say, we're going to send out resources to everyone who attended, and hopefully that'll answer some of the questions as well. The final one is about the sort of cohesion in services, and like one of obviously the problems often is that the left hand and the right hand don't necessarily know what they're even doing. And how can we try and promote cohesion, whether it's looking at GRT issues, whether it's looking at LGBT issues, whether it's looking at activism in any sense? How do we get the cohesion between councils, services, charities? Is there a way to try and streamline that and make it work for people rather than necessarily for the organizations just?
I think it's important to actually... Sorry, go on, Lois.
I was just going to say there needs to be collaboration between especially charities for different groups and especially like GRT orgs. Because like, for example, there's big inaccessibilities. Like I remember I went to an event in Prague where I said that I was kosher, which is very strict, by the way. And like when I turned up at the event, they just told me when I was there that they had no kosher stuff. So for a whole week, I had to try and eat non-kosher food despite my religion and community. And they even once accidentally served me ham, which is pork, and that's like a big no-no. And they actually made me feel really bad about it. And I think that's because there's no, like for example, Jewish charities or charities that respond to that, actually communicating with Roma NGOs, GRT NGOs, to make sure that they're properly like supporting intersectional folk, because that can't just be on me all the time as an individual, because it can feel like very much like a you versus them situation, when actually it's a much bigger thing. And sometimes you need that backing from other spaces to be like, this isn't just Lois being narky, being an angry Jewish woman. This is like Lois because like kosher is very much tied to like very sacred identity, and like I can't just, unfortunately I can't survive for a week in Prague eating fruit. So like, you know, there's stuff like that that needs to be sorted out, because it can be really bad, and it can also put off intersectional community members as well. You need to actively communicate. It can't just be waiting on GRT orgs to contact you. It also needs to be an action from Jewish orgs and other LGBT whatever actively communicating with GRT orgs to check in and make sure people are being held accountable, because I can say from experience that it always becomes you versus the other people when it's a social topic that doesn't include their identity.
Yeah, it'd be mentally draining and emotionally draining for you though, always to be fighting like for what, like just for like one thing, like because they're always putting you in a one category. You can't do it. It's you need at least support as well. They need to support you.
Yeah, but it's really bad. Like this stuff kind of happens all the time, and you enter like and there's also no cohesion with like education in that aspect as well, because I've entered like GRT spaces where people spreading misinformation and say that the no Romanis were capos during like the Holocaust, and that there was better values than that Jewish people, and people don't really reflect on how that's not only false, but it can also really negatively impact community relations and for those who are intersectional in those spaces. Because again, if I challenge it in that space, it becomes me being an angry Jew to a room full of people who aren't Jewish. And that happens all the time with activism.
So it needs this structural challenging rather than just putting the emphasis on these individual activists who are then being forced to do this emotional work.
Yeah, because it's cost friendships of mine, you know? Like it's cost friendships because like other charities aren't willing to like step in and like educate or work or collaborate with GRT orgs, or even vice versa, like, you know, to like we like sort out these really big problems, and it ends up creating like big divisions. And it makes, there's been so many situations where I felt like the big angry Jew at the end of it, and that I'm the problem because people aren't willing to contend with their anti-Semitism or wider issues relating to other identities in a space. And that is a really big issue, and it's actually caused me a lot of pain. So I really do wish that, you know, Jewish orgs, if there is any on this or have contacted them, to get in contact with GRT orgs about like practices, about collaborating together and about different stuff like that, because it can be really hard because people think there isn't a lot of Romani Jews or traveller Jews. There is a lot. There is massive pockets of Romani Jews. I can name probably about 30 people that I actively engage with in my life who are Romani Jewish activists. Like, you know, it is a large community.
So because we're really, really running out of time, unfortunately, I've got one final question. It's short and sweet, and it's for each of you, just to bring it all to a close. Who is a particular individual, can be from any marginalized group or any type of activism, who really inspires you as an activist and as a person? So I'll just go around you again, and you can just all sort of answer, maybe just a quick, very quick comment as to why. Lois?
Mine is Antonella Duda. She is a trans Romani activist based in Bucharest, Romania. And she speaks up on so many issues relating to feminism and working class issues. And I really think we need to uplift like our own heroes and be like, hey, you guys should look at Antonella Duda. She's freaking fabulous. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of what I want to put out. Like, you know, let's get representative, let's get queer Roma representation on the map, you know?
James?
My biggest inspiration would be my mother. Like the way she's inspired me from such a young age to always like express myself, be myself, and even like she was the first person I ever came out to, and was always just so accepting of everything and helped me through so much in life. So yeah, definitely my mother inspires me to do what I do.
And Lena, finally.
Well, I don't know. I would say Davy inspired me to take a step up towards campaigning and like speaking up a bit more. Like, because I was the same, and then Davy come about and he was speaking out about travellers, and I thought, you know, I could speak out about a bit more about disability, because it's just in the box. Everything's always you're put in this box, and you need to be like thrown out and given a different stigma that's attached to everything, you know?
Well, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. I'm sure we'll all agree that it's been fantastic listening to them, and we're really grateful that you guys gave up your time and took, you know, put in the emotional energy to this, because we know it's hard work having to do to be doing the education, but that it's important, and hopefully people have appreciated it and learned from it, and we will share the resources with everybody. So Progress and Dialogue, we will soon have our website up and running. It's under maintenance right now, but if you go to the website, you will be able to sign up to be notified when it exists. We have a Facebook page you can like, and we have a Facebook group you can join, where we're hoping people will continue having these sorts of conversations and interacting with each other, and where resources can be shared. And you can follow us on Twitter as well, if that is your preferred social media platform. So next week we have another one of these events, our final Conversations for Change for GRT History Month. That can be signed up for our Eventbrite as well. Jacob is very helpfully sharing some of these links to our social media right now in the chat function. What we also will do, as I've said before, is we're going to send you feedback forms via email. We'd really appreciate you filling these in so that we can develop as an organization and with our events, trying to make them better, more inclusive, whatever you guys think. We really appreciate that. And thank you all for giving up some of your Wednesday evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope to see you again at future Progress and Dialogue events. Keep tuned, because we will be having more, and possibly featuring these wonderful guys again, but other fantastic speakers too. And if you have an idea for an event, if you're engaged in activism, or you have stories from your own experience you want to share, please get in touch with us at our email address, and share your ideas, because, you know, that's what this is about. It's about empowering community voices, not Davy, Jacob and myself deciding we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We want to do what communities want to do and what activists want to do and what they're going to feel empowered doing. So thanks again to everyone for attending, and hope you had a lovely evening.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you for creating this space. Yeah,
it's been great chatting. I'm sure we'll all catch up again soon, y'all.
Yeah, speaking to everybody, it was like, yeah, banter. I loved it.
But yeah, if you guys join the Facebook group as well, you can continue the chat there.
Cool. How do I find that, or do I just I'll contact Davey after this to find out that, yeah, because
might be the link that Jacob shared in the chat there, but if not, Davey will have your back.
All right, yeah, he's just put it in. Cheers, Davey. Yeah. Type fast, yeah. Never know someone type so fast. But yeah.
All right, it was nice meeting everybody.
Lovely to meet you guys.
Lovely to meet you guys. Take
All right.
care.
Ta-ra, you guys on the panel, you're fabulous, yeah? Look, well done. Absolutely powerhouses.
Thank you. It's all good. We're all good together.
Yeah, amazing.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna toddle off. I don't know how to get this off.
Yes.
Just
I'm
exit
okay.
it, just-
Right, so what's the situation?
You don't know how to, you don't know how to get it off.
You press leave.